All right, this week, pros and cons, you know the deal. It's where I bring on a conservative activist, a professional, a politician, a professor, a writer. And this week, joining me is Lindsay Wigo from the Daily Caller, at Lindsay Wigo on Twitter. Give her a follow. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and be talking to you. Feels like we got some good stuff to talk about amidst all this quarantine stuff, so should be pretty good.
Yeah, Lindsay has been following relentlessly everything going on with the coronavirus task force. Obviously, in my breakdown today, I didn't talk about the coronavirus. I talked about Sleepy Joe and what he's been up to, because apparently the man who doesn't know how to string a sentence together now has a podcast. Gave it a listen. Unbelievably funny, and is rated explicit. So there's that. But yes, for our coronavirus pill today, we have on Lindsay to talk about everything that's going on during these crazy coronavirus task force press conferences. So let's jump right into it. Lindsay, let's start with the big kerfuffle, which, really wasn't a kerfuffle at all on Monday at the coronavirus press briefing over Mike Lindell. And, for our viewers, y'all know him. He's the self-made owner of MyPillow. He was sharing a few words. And for those of you who don't know his story, he is the self-made owner of MyPillow, obviously. And he was a drug addict in the 80s and 90s. He was addicted to crack, addicted to cocaine, and addicted to alcohol, and it completely destroyed his life. His house was foreclosed upon, his marriage ended in divorce, and then he became a Christian. And Lindell apparently achieved sobriety through a reinvigoration or finding faith. And I think that's an amazing story, an amazing American story. So honestly, props to Mr. Lindell. I'm going to read Mr. Lindell's comments in full. We give our viewers the full information on this show. We're not going to do any cheap cuts like CNN. And then, Lindsay, I'll definitely get your reaction. All right, so here's what Mr. Lindell said in the Rose Garden earlier this week. MyPillow is a U.S. vertically integrated company which has been forced to adjust to the changing business environment as a result of the pandemic. MyPillow is uniquely positioned as a U.S. company that functions as a manufacturer, logistics management distributor, and direct-to-consumer. Given our current business lines, we are experiencing the effects of this pandemic firsthand. What MyPillow has done is establish an internal task force which is monitoring future needs of companies across the country as a result of this pandemic, and given our position, we have begun to research and develop new protocols to address the current and future needs of the U.S. businesses across multiple sectors, how companies are going to prepare themselves once they open up, and changes to their current operations in order to adjust to the future threats and pandemics. MyPillow has designated some of its call centers to help U.S. companies navigate many issues resulting from this pandemic. We've designated 75% of my manufacturing to produce cotton face masks. In 3 days, I was up to 10,000 per day. By Friday, I want to be up to 50,000 per day. I'm a proud manufacturer in the United States, and I'm even more proud to be able to serve our nation in this great time of need. Thank you, Mr. President, for your call to action, which has empowered companies like MyPillow to help our nation to win this invisible war. And he says, now I wrote something off the cuff. If I can read it, he kind of turns to the president, asks him, and he lets him go. And this is what he says after that. God gave us grace on November 8th, 2016 to change the course we were on. Taken out of our schools and lives, a nation had turned its back on God. I encourage you to use this time at home to get back into the Word, read our Bibles, and spend time with our families. Our president gave us so much hope, where just a few short months ago we had the best economy in the world, the lowest unemployment, and wages were going up. It was amazing. With our great president, vice president, and this administration, and all the great people in this country praying daily, we will get through this and get back to a place that's stronger than ever. So, Lindsay, the man is certainly entitled to his opinion over the divine providence of God sending Trump to own the libs, effectively. But that being said, what's your take on Lindell saying this at the press conference? And then give us some of the fallout with the media and their reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. At first, I want to say that I just think it's incredible in general, regardless of your political beliefs, that a company like MyPillow has completely restructured itself to do something just for the people. And it's not the only company, obviously, that's been doing things like this to create masks or, to create gowns and things like that for hospitals and like clinics that are lacking. I just think that's like absolutely incredible for a company to do that during a crisis like this. And basically that off the cuff moment definitely took some hit and some heat on social media, especially on Twitter. People started saying, they started arguing the concept of, like separation of like church and state. And many people were not too happy that comment and about praying and all of that was just delivered. hundreds of media reaction and public opinion. I'm kind of going to separate the two a little bit because a lot of people on Twitter who reacted to this are not involved directly, in like political news in any way. But like I just remember after I've been following these press conferences very closely, and public opinion, like the public's reaction was very surprised. A lot of them weren't completely informed on what exactly, even though Mike Lindell just explained what he was doing, a lot of them weren't super informed on what he was doing. A lot of the comments that I saw and a lot of the tweets were like, oh, like I feel so confident that I'm like that Mike Lindell is like is trying to help America. And actually, like he actually is helping America. People just think and they hear like, they see his logo, they see his name, and they don't really know what he's doing. They just think it's kind of like a joke. So I think that the public's reaction was just kind of uninformed, and to be completely honest. Now, the media, who has a little bit of an upper hand and a little bit more of maybe an interest in this because they've been following it for their news source, didn't really focus on the number of, masks that he says that his company will be creating, per day, per week. They jumped immediately on this off-the-cuff comment about praying and about like religion, and how I believe he even said that he began his speech a little bit about how like on November 8th, 2016, basically like referencing how that day changed like the course of, of the United States, because that's when, Trump came like into office and he won. And this media's reaction was just saying like, should this be televised? Should this be something that like our nation is hearing? Because obviously we are a lot of differing opinions, a lot of differing backgrounds and views. So it was very interesting. I didn't directly cover any Mike Lindell content for what I've been doing for the press briefings. I actually focused more on a lot of like the reporters' coverage, but it was definitely interesting to see how a lot of left-leaning outlets kind of jumped over the fact of how helpful Mike Lindell and his company is being, and focused directly on it wasn't appropriate for him to reference anything like religious or like spiritual during his speech.
And Lindsay, you brought up a really, really good point, is that the public's reaction was misinformed. The media, they're on top of these things. Yeah. They know full well that he just devoted 75% of his manufacturing directly to creating cotton masks and to helping healthcare workers on the ground. I mean, the healthcare workers are incredibly appreciative of MyPillow today, especially if they get up to $50K per day at the end of this week. I mean, that's going to be phenomenal, right? They're super proud of this. The public, the reason that they're misinformed is, get this, CNN executive editor Ram Ramgopal tweeted out, "In case you were wondering what MyPillow is doing at a time of coronavirus," and he tweeted that out with an edited version of his speech at the press conference that cuts out everything until he starts talking about Jesus and about how on November 8th, God gave us deliverance and changed the trajectory of this country. Okay, yes. If you say that, okay, here's CNN executive editor, higher up, oh my goodness, Trump just had this guy come and talk about how he's basically sent by God to handle the coronavirus, I would understand public outrage. But this is what the media does. They clip things, they twist things, they spin things, and it's no wonder that they are being called fake news, not only by the president, but all of his supporters, because all of his supporters see that and say, listen, he invokes the name of God after he says, listen, I've turned my life around and now I'm in a position to give back to my country that's given me so much. And I think it's just absolutely crazy. And you mentioned the separation of church and state argument coming out of journalists from places like People's News, where she goes, oh, this is clearly a violation of the First Amendment. This establishes a religion. No, it's not a violation of church and state. There's actually no provision in the Constitution that says anything about church and state, but it does forbid the state establishment of a religion. Now, anyone who gets up on the podium and expresses their religious beliefs aren't making any sort of governmental move to establish a religion. So that's why that argument is just, foolish in and of itself. But I would love... You
could tell how personal that was to him too. You could just what you read a few minutes ago, it was completely about how he changed his life around and how he felt that what happened with Trump was like, it was all his own feelings, and he was never trying to, in my opinion, I don't think he was ever trying to make it seem like it was more of a worldwide like statement. You know what I mean? Like I think it was truly just it was about what he was doing. It was about what his company was doing, and he was tying in his own feelings and his own thoughts into what his company was doing. And I don't think he was trying to really press that in a negative way onto anybody. I think he was trying to just further emphasize how like happy and how lucky and how humbled he was to be able to provide, 50,000 a day now he's saying, how that opportunity has just been really incredible for him to be able to give back to the world like that.
And I think another really important part is it's very evident that the members of the media don't know a damned thing about American history. They've never even been to the Lincoln Memorial. I encourage everyone who goes to DC, obviously visit the Lincoln Memorial, not because it's like this big thing, oh my goodness, a big statue, but on the walls of the Lincoln Memorial are engraved some of Lincoln's most famous sayings and speeches. The invocation of God and divine providence in those speeches from the president, not from My Pillow guy, the My Pillow guy of the 1860s. No, from the president himself, invokes God in such a powerful and beautiful way. And you can't help but read that and get chills for the United States and the purpose of the United States and the values of the Judeo-Christian values that undergird the United States. And if they are unappreciative of the My Pillow guy in 2020, I mean, it will only be a matter of time until cancel culture, of course, it's come after George Washington and Thomas Jefferson because slave owning, but it will come after Abraham Lincoln on the lines that he was an ardent Christian and he believed in spreading his beliefs through his own bully pulpit. I mean, that's not an establishment. That's just him expressing what he feels about the current American moment time and time again. And you mentioned this earlier, right? The reaction shifted from, the media, just wonderful people the media are. We're going to take this story of a self-made man helping out the coronavirus pandemic too. This is actually all about us, right? You mentioned this, that now people are considering not airing the Trump parts of the coronavirus task force. I mean, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, Scott Dworkin, tweeted that because Trump had on Mike Lindell in the Rose Garden, the media ought not to cover his coronavirus press conferences. This routine was followed up by Chris Hayes of MSNBC saying the same thing, Don Lemon of CNN 2. And the crazy part is it seems like it's actually working. I mean, these calls to stop airing the press conferences are actually working because on Tuesday, CNN didn't show the president's remarks and only aired the parts where Fauci and Birx were speaking. So first, what do you make of this? And explain to our viewers why this is such an absolutely terrible idea for the media.
Yeah, this is a very good question and very interesting to talk about. Basically, when I was turning it on 5:15, I was flicking back and forth because I know that, multiple outlets have been covering these, rightfully so. Like, it just makes sense. It just makes sense to do it. For an all around, the coronavirus is not discriminating. You know what I mean? It's not picking a political belief. It's not being one-sided. It is affecting everybody. So therefore, I just think that every, cable news, just mainstream news, should be covering it if they are given the opportunity to, and basically they all are able to. And I noticed that CNN never began to air it when it began. I have some pulled up on my computer. I can have a live stream of it on my computer, and I also had it on my TV. And I was like, wow, interesting. Okay, so CNN's not covering it. Wondering if they just didn't switch over to it yet. And then I went on Twitter and realized, wow, okay, CNN really is not covering it. Very interesting move. And then I don't know if you were gonna ever bring this up a little bit later, but it was interesting because when they did eventually start covering, they would kind of air on, kind of switch off, fade away. President Trump made a comment about Jesus just yesterday, and this is during the portion where CNN was airing the press briefing, and it was very interesting because right when he referenced Jesus, it faded out and went back to the studio. And it's interesting because I feel like I'm almost a little bit trained to notice and listen for things like this. So I'm not really sure that the average person would have noticed that type of instance where, oh, Trump just referenced, Jesus, he just referenced religion again, and then CNN fades away and cuts away from it. So that was something that I saw was circulating Twitter almost immediately. It was when they do cover it, they are being very picky and choosy about what exactly they're airing. But going back to your first question about why that's just in poor taste to not, and I believe MSNBC also didn't cover the majority of the the briefing as well, not just CNN. And like I said earlier, it's just, I think it's in poor taste because I think they should be letting the people who are, watching CNN decide, hey, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to listen to Trump. I don't want to listen to what's going on. And instead of giving them the option to kind of pull back and to find it and to turn it off if they don't want to watch it, they just completely did not give them the option to watch it at all. It just looks bad for a number of reasons. Just like I said, this is a worldwide issue, and it shouldn't be just because it's the president, like this administration, this president who's talking about, how horrible this pandemic is, this disease is, and this problem. It shouldn't be limited to only right wing or right leaning outlets are going to cover it because it's Trump. It should be like a just complete, like unanimous. Everyone should be covering it because it's just so important to stay informed and to hear what's actually going on behind the scenes. And they're giving you the opportunity to hear as much as you can about what's going on behind the scenes. There, yesterday's was what? I broke the 2-hour mark, which was absolutely unheard of. I couldn't believe it went on for that long. But there were just so many questions that people wanted to know, and the president and Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci were just very informative, and they should just be giving, like, a company and a channel like CNN should be giving definitely the opportunity for viewers to watch this information if they want to.
I agree. I mean, it's completely vital information for the public. It's really an unprecedented level of transparency. Trump is the reality TV president for good and for bad, and that brings itself to bear in those ways. But this is a terrible idea for the media, and at least the way that they're doing it now, right? If they air the full thing, is they get to fact check him in real time, right? And at least that gives some sort of at least that gives some sort of guise of neutrality or hide a little bit of their hackery, right? But to just say, like Don Lemon did, that we're going to give you highlights via clips, I mean, we've seen how that goes in the past. Or then we saw it with the Mike Lindell stuff right before they started calling for only showing clips. Ram Ramgopal tweeting out what MyPillow is doing without actually providing any relevant context for the American people to be educated on what MyPillow, a mid-sized American business, is doing. Right, is actually doing to help in the coronavirus pandemic, that serves possibly as inspiration for other U.S. manufacturing companies that are small or mid-sized to say, hey, you know what? I'm really interested in that. I want to get involved. My father owns a stone manufacturing company, and a chemical manufacturing company, and basically some of his stuff is subcontracted out to a chemical manufacturing company as well that gives us back the product. They started making hand sanitizer this week, right, to help with the efforts in the coronavirus, to help keep our construction workers who are working on infrastructure projects safe during this whole thing, because that's really what the industry we're in is construction. And a lot of this probably motivation is coming from seeing examples like MyPillow, seeing other examples in the industry turn their production from quartz cleaner. I know this stone talk is super boring, but like boring stuff, but like quartz cleaner to hand sanitizer that people and medical professionals can use to keep themselves safe. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous that they want to cut this thing off completely. Also, I do have to say, I saw your tweet about CNN cutting the president off as he said the word Jesus. I mean, I don't want to go full Rush Limbaugh here, but what do you make of that? And what was it intentional? As Mike Lindell made all the journalists worried about the separation of church and state on Twitter. Do you think this is coincidence or conspiracy? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, that whole, like I said a little bit, I've talked about this a little bit already. That was absolutely wild. Especially just for someone who has been like trained to notice like weird little things like that, like I was saying, the average person necessarily who's not directly involved in like political news or following politics or just anything in like that kind of realm might not have noticed that, you know what I mean? Like, unless someone brought it to their attention. So I definitely feel like I had a bit of an upper hand, as well as a lot of other journalists did, who might have noticed that and been like, huh, okay, like that definitely just happened. And you're always when you notice things like this, like yesterday when I noticed this, I was like, I don't want to think that that's what happened. You don't want to think like this is like that is actually the truth. I don't really know, to be honest. I wouldn't put it past any company who doesn't want that type of language about religion being aired. I wouldn't put it past a company to kind of pull back. It's something that they don't want to air. But And also, it's just funny. Like it could also just be it could also be a coincidence, like that was when their time was up, and it sounds kind of just funny to say it because a lot of people just don't agree with that. A lot of people think that's CNN not wanting to, like they're picking, like I said, they're picking and choosing when exactly they want to air the president, and they don't want to show him any moment where he's talking about, religion or anything about like God or Jesus or anything like that. So yeah, I tweeted something about that, and a lot of other people kind of swarmed to it, and they were like, "Yep, we all noticed that too." And I was like, "Okay, so that definitely just happened. Like that was a thing that didn't just kind of fly over my mind, and like people should be noticing things like this." And I hope that not just my tweet, because I saw that there were other journalists or other like political, like news junkies, should I say, also referenced this as well. And I hope that something like this kind of sticks out more the next time that because I know it's probably going to happen again in the future, whether it's with CNN or just any outlet. Something like this is going to happen again, and I hope that noticing this and having this kind of rush on Twitter about, oh, did you just see CNN pull back? It helps people notice when incidents or situations like this happen more.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And you mentioned how long these press conferences are going, and I mentioned how that's pretty unprecedented levels of transparency. And part of
Yeah,
it's just because I like to talk. I like to talk. Give me your question. Give me your question. I love to hear the questions. Type of thing that
exactly.
Trump likes to do.
Mhm.
But I it's amazing how much time the media wastes when they have a president and a entire task force of health professionals sitting there waiting to give you the answers
Yeah,
that they can. How many N95 masks are we producing? How many of those are going out? What's predicted death tolls? And some of these questions are being asked, but for 2 hours of answering questions, I mean, that should be your focus. The focus is winning the war and beating the invisible enemy in the coronavirus. But I mean, these dang journalists can't get out of their own way. I believe it was Monday. I mean, Jim Acosta asked just a silly question and got shellacked by President Trump. Tell us a little bit about that. And then I also saw your tweet that said that he asked a good question on Tuesday. So
yeah,
tell us what was the bad
yeah.
question, what was the good question, what is going on? I mean, did this all break Jim Acosta? Is he going to be a real journalist now, or is he gonna go
Oh
back
my
to being
gosh.
the ultimate grandstander in the Rose Garden?
Yeah, basically, the past couple of days I've been making a joke that I've been on like the Jim Acosta beat for these press briefings. Because a few days ago when
Beats the Jane Fonda
pictures of
beat.
him from out beats the Jane Fonda beat, absolutely. Very interesting people I've been following for sure. But it was funny because a picture of him from outside the White House, one of my friends actually like kind of screen grabbed it and put it on Twitter and was like, "Uh-oh, like look who's going to be in the briefing today." And we were like, "Oh, there it is. Like, something's going to be asked. We don't know exactly how like controversial or how relevant it's going to be because we know that Trump and Jim Acosta definitely like butt heads before in the past. Um, yeah, he basically was asking a lot about yesterday, for example, was the day where, in the beginning at least, he was asking some like pretty normal questions, which is just funny because shouldn't just journalists just ask normal questions, like But yeah, he started asking questions about a lot of numbers and like projections for numbers on masks, like you were saying. And he referenced when Trump was actually being very like a little almost different with Acosta because, like I said, they butt heads before. He was passing a lot of his questions on to the doctors who I believe he even like said once like I don't want to like misconstrue or I don't want to kind of see something wrong. So I'm gonna like Jim, if it's okay, I'm gonna pass you like your question along to them. And it was weird because like people were like, oh, are they like getting along? Like, is this like a budding friendship? This is interesting. Um, but then once it kind of became like the Jim Acosta show a little bit toward the end, I don't even know what constitutes the end because this went on for like 2 hours. But like I guess at some point throughout it, it just felt like he was repeating the same questions again. And he asked, I know one of the questions that he asked that kind of stirred up some talk online was, do you like basically like do you regret how you've like handled or how you told people to like worry about this in the past. It was something along the lines. I definitely did not just quote that correctly at all, but it was something about like your opinion has changed and your stance has changed. Like why? Like should people like why should people know that your opinion on coronavirus has changed? And that was when it was like, oh, okay, like maybe he's not just asking like questions about numbers. Maybe he's still trying to get like, like a good soundbite of catching Trump in a bad moment and things like that. Um, Yeah, so it was interesting because I volunteered to follow Jim Acosta in his questions because I knew that he was going to be back again yesterday. And then it turned into like the Jim Acosta show where I feel like every like third reporter was, yes, Jim, like go ahead, Jim. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's asking so many things and Trump is just letting him. Like normally Trump would give him like one, maybe two, and then cut him off like he would any other reporter who he doesn't want to ask, the same questions. Um, but yeah, and then it was funny because I looked on Jim Acosta's Twitter just this morning actually, and he was retweeting a lot of like other people's tweets that were quoting him and quoting Trump's responses, and they were all like pretty fair, which once again should be just like kind of a no-brainer because it's like journalists. But it was interesting that he even was like re-upping and promoting some of the conversations that he had with Trump yesterday, whether or not everyone thinks that they were like ill-willed or if they had like bad intentions behind them. But it was definitely interesting having Acosta be in there, and I guarantee that it's not the last of him. And it was just interesting the stark contrast between, I believe it was 2 days ago and then yesterday, or yeah, I feel like 2 days ago than yesterday, he was being told, like, why don't you ask a normal question? Like that's what Trump said to him. And then just yesterday, he called on him like numerous times to ask questions and to ask follow-ups. And they were just full-on dialogues for a while that weren't heated. It was just like a normal, like you would not know, oh, like that's Jim Acosta and they've butt heads in the past. It was just very interesting from like a media perspective to watch a journalist who is, who Trump's like tweeted about fake news CNN and Jim Acosta, who like obviously is a part of CNN. It was just very interesting to watch that and to be able to clip moments from that and to not necessarily have constant bickering. It was very interesting for someone who works in like rapid response type work, video work. It was really cool.
All right, so Mike Lindell, Jim Acosta, not only the big stories coming out of the press conference this week, an exchange between President Trump and Yamiche Alcindor, who had already had a adversarial relationship before this happened. I mean, dating back to, I think, 2018.
Yeah.
I read a piece on the Daily Caller in 2018 about this dynamic between Yamiche and Trump. But this new exchange has been making the rounds. So fill us in on what happened there.
Yeah.
I mean, she's gone on so many news shows and, she went on Pod Save America and all this stuff. She's been making the rounds as, yes, I am the champion type of beat that she's doing now in the wake of this. So fill us in on exactly what happened there and its fallout.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe she's a PBS reporter. She's hopped around a bit, as Trump actually mentioned in one of his responses to her question. Basically, Yamiche asked, I believe it was 2 days ago. Well, everything's kind of blending together. But one of the first controversial, moments that happened was when she asked a question about a comment that Trump made about regarding New York and the number of, the number of products that New York like requires or something along the lines of that. And basically content of it was she was quoting Trump. She said that she was quoting Trump and from the Sean Hannity show that he where he expressed this information, and he basically was saying like, no, I never said that. And she tried to ask a few follow-ups and the mic was basically removed and it was moved on to somebody else before it eventually circled back to her. But that was one of the first kind of like everyone's head kind of like perks up and looks up when they hear a little bit of banter going on, and a little bit of bickering between the two of them. I believe that some of the headlines that have been like circulating with this specific scenario was that he said that something about her question was threatening, and that made headlines for sure. She did like you were saying, she did a couple of like stand-ups where she was saying that she was referencing something that he said, and he didn't like to hear his own his own statements, whether or not like whatever reason that would be, whether or not he didn't agree with what he once said or if he was embarrassed or anything like that. But like her story was that he said something on Sean Hannity, and she was quoting him directly, what she says, and he was denying it. So that definitely made its rounds online. And she's just such a familiar face now with these, especially just for this coronavirus press briefing, because she's getting in questions all the time, multiple. Like just many questions. And it's just funny when Trump repeatedly, kind of calls on her. It's like she's giving him, I guess, like a run for his money, and he's also kind of not being afraid to fire back at her as well.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point, that these dynamics emerge between the president and the reporter that kind of serves this adversarial feedback loop sometimes, right? The president Trump likes to be known as the guy who hits the media, and the media likes to be known as the people who
Oh,
hit President
absolutely.
Trump. Now the difference is
Yeah,
that
it's
Trump's.
like
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Uh,
I was gonna say, I feel like that these press conferences, this just made me think of this when you mentioned that kind of like this back and forth. It's like these pressers are turning into which reporter can have the best soundbite is what I truly feel like it's turning into. Yesterday's was a little different because of like, how long it was, but especially the ones when they were like, outside and like they were outside in the Rose Garden and everything like that. It was a lot of, it felt like just from like someone who does like a little bit of reporting just in like a different kind of format. It's like which question and which response is going to circulate, is going to trend, it's going to be clipped and pulled almost immediately, and tweeted out. So it's kind of like which, and I don't know if that's for I'm not speaking on behalf of every reporter, but it's definitely apparent that especially for such a heavy topic and such a like well-known topic like the coronavirus, that these questions, people are watching them, people are wanting to hear what they're asking, people are wanting to hear what Trump has to say, and any type of quick or like snarky response that Trump would have, or a reporter would kind of go back at him, they know that they're going to make it online and that their name is going to be out there, that their clip's going to be pulled. So it's almost like which reporter can kind of start a little bit of like internet chaos. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and in all fairness, right, the reason that Trump is so beloved by the Republican Party, now the reason that he was beloved by so many in 2015, before he had even won the nomination, was that he was the guy who was willing to fight back against the media. I mean, the media made this bed. The media
Yeah.
gave us Trump, and now they're kind of forced to lie in it. So at least when I see this adversarial feedback loop that emerges off of both teams trying to get a soundbite, this is part of Trump's mandate. It's an unspoken mandate from the Republican Party, is that he go out and do this, and that that's a mandate from his base, not as much the party institution, right? That he go out and do this, so it's predictable. The journalists have been crying objectivity for years while being incredibly slanted, and Trump is bringing that to light. There's a difference between a probing question and a gotcha question guised as a probing question. And I think we're seeing a lot of that with this coronavirus task force stuff, right? It's not in the media's mandate to go out and get Trump permanently. I mean, Zucker at CNN may be telling all of his journalists to do that, but that obviously in the history of the United States, or at least the way that you're educated about, is that the media is the fourth estate of government. Make sure that everything's transparent, that everything that they are
Absolutely.
speaking truth to power, and I think that dynamic time and time again has been proven false. One of my favorite sportscasters is Colin Cowherd, and whenever he talks about sports and its relationship to the media, he always says, the media loves stories. The problem that we've run into in political media is that the media loves stories about themselves. The media likes to
absolutely.
not objectively report on the story or give you the facts as a third-party observer, but they are now set on interjecting any way, shape, and form that they can, and by making themselves part of the story, by making themselves the story, if not part of the story, that is why their credibility has been so damaged over the past 10 years. I mean, and this goes way before Trump. Do you think I'm right on that assessment? Why do people hate you, Lindsay? You media journo crazy person? Why do they hate you? Am I right on that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a like relevant question. This especially in this like in the past 4 years. Why does the media hate us? No. And why do people hate us? Why does everyone hate us? Yeah, it's just definitely like a competition in a weird way. It's who can tell the story the way that it's not even always about telling the story the most objectively anymore, as you said, and that's sad, and that's why like I'm speaking from working at the Daily Caller, where we try to report on things that are not covered by mainstream media, and we report them, here it is, like this is what happened, here's what's not being covered by mainstream media. But it definitely is there's just so much more competition among media outlets now, and I'm thinking of like the big two, which is like people think of Fox versus CNN. And it's especially just showing in the way that they can each cover one specific story. So let's say this story about Yamiche, like, and her questions, who does not work at either CNN or Fox News. That story, it's just inevitable that story will kind of take two different routes to it. And it's just because of like the polarization that we're in right now, and that's just such an overused term, but it's just so accurate, I think. And as someone who is, it's really funny too, because I am pulling live clips from these press briefings, and like I was saying earlier, how like CNN wasn't airing all of it. Even two companies that are showing in like live streaming and broadcasting the exact same speech, the exact same coverage, like the exact same event, just the way that they cut in and out, or what they show, what they don't show, their chyrons at the bottom, everything is just, you put them next to each other and they could be drastically different. And it's about the exact same issue. It's literally about President Trump speaking on the coronavirus with two, respected doctors and his administration and his task force. And that's just one of the things that's very interesting, because as I'm hopping between, like, okay, let's see what C-SPAN has, or let's see what the White House has. Oh, CNN has it here. Like, oh, let's turn on Fox. It's like it could be 4 or 5 completely different narratives all about the exact same issue, the exact same event. And that's just something that it's weird, because we become a little like used to it. It's kind of like, oh, what's the chyron today? When do they go to commercial? When do they go back to the studio? And I don't think it really used to be like that. Now, obviously, I wasn't involved in the news 10 years ago, but just noticing it, the little bit of the coverage, how it's changed since before Trump came into office versus how he is in office now, is very, very interesting. A lot of people that I know have made jokes like, oh, like CNN used to be like, literally the most like trusted name. Like everyone, that's all they watch. They would turn on CNN before they would turn on anything else. And now just, like people who are older than me, like their opinions on CNN and like their stories that I've heard about how like some of these mainstream outlets no longer cover content and stories like they used to, it just speaks volumes to what we're working in now, especially as like young journalists and young, like politicos, if you want to use that word. It's just really interesting to see that this is like what we're used to, and it's not what people who are older than us and our parents or whatever were used to. And that is just something that is taken a little bit of getting used to, that this is not always how, the political climate used to be in any way. And it's definitely a weird time to be working in the news, but it's like incredibly entertaining, and it's very like fulfilling. And you just learn so much just learning about like being a member of the media, watching other members of the media. You learn so much more than like you ever would from learning about journalism in school, and maybe you can like agree with that if, because I know that you're involved in this whole like political world too. Just watching and learning is like been absolutely unreal, to cover the differences between, what things used to be and what things are now.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. I have over 90 published. It's funny, I added them all to my LinkedIn like last month, so I know that I have over like 90 published pieces. Some of them reports, some of them op-eds. Yeah. Across a variety of different publications. Of course, all of them on the right, because I want to give my opinion. I'm honest about the fact that I lean to the right. My analysis of what's happening in the news leans to the right, so I tend to gravitate towards those types of publications, obviously. But I've never taken a journalism class. And I'm learning as I go through experience. I mean, I'm sure you do the same thing. You look back at your old pieces or your old video clips, and you, wow, I was way off base here, or I was analyzing this from a naive perspective. And I think you mentioned something really, really important when we talk about it. One of the buzzwords in the political world, right? Polarization. The media is. It's another feedback loop with the media, right? The media becomes polarized, the people become polarized. So the media, in response to the people being more polarized, becomes more polarized, and it's just this endless positive feedback loop, right? It's not self-regulating in any way, shape, or form. And that's a perfect way to put it. When you just put two chyrons up with the same clip, I mean, it's just it's like you're on a different universe when you're looking at some of those things. And this is going to be our exit question, because we've gone way over time, but I guess I should have led with this. Really, I should have led with this. You our other friends over at the Daily Caller, Logan Hall, and the recently POTUS retweeted Greg Price, or quote tweeted, I guess. POTUS quote tweeted Greg Price. Y'all are psychopaths, because you guys have been watching all of these press conferences in full and covering these press conferences like Joe Biden caressing the shoulders of any random woman. So, you've been covering this in full, diving in on everything. You mentioned previously why the American people should watch, but to send us off, tell our viewers why they need to tune into these press conferences. You don't have to sit there and watch every single little question, but tell them what information they'll be getting and why they should be tuning in.
Yeah, just to be straightforward with it, there's a lot of word going around about this. If you have a Twitter account, you could see 30 different things and have 30 pieces of information, and they're all different, and you don't know what to believe. You don't know what's true. And that's how it is in anything. Take it outside of politics, like anybody can claim a fact on the internet. But these, just from like a human standpoint, these press briefings are not meant to really scare anyone. They're meant to inform. You're supposed to hear from, like respected reporters and people who have been following, this pandemic for a while, ask questions that can affect you. And you might feel like you're a little bit isolated from that, or that literally you might feel isolated, as we are all literally isolating ourselves. But you might feel like you're not directly involved with it. And this is a really interesting and unique way where you're able to hear directly from the source, from the task force themselves, what to do, why things are going the way they are, what we can do. Like, it feels like we can only do so little, but actually, why staying inside is important, all those types of things. And it's important to hear these, and they're every day, they're daily, until I believe just further notice is how Trump has been wording it. They're pretty much every day, and it can get a little bit repetitive in the sense that you feel like you're just hearing bad news, but it's not supposed to be about hearing bad news. It's supposed to be learning about what's next, why decisions are being made the way they are, and yeah, it's important to just be informed about what's going on, so that if other people come to you and ask you why things are happening, this XYZ way, you're able to pull from, oh, okay, well, this is what I gathered from this yesterday, and this is what I learned from this 2 days ago. You're able to just form a more well-rounded statement and opinion on all that's going on. And just, they're literally giving you a reason to learn about this directly. It's in the form of entertainment. You can literally watch, you can stream it on your phone. It's giving it all this information to you in a really cohesive way, or as cohesive as 2 hours yesterday was, but you know what I'm saying. And then these media companies who are working, I know the video team of the Daily Caller has been pulling some of the best moments from these, and best moments could be controversial questions, things that aren't always asked. So I think it's just really important to not only watch the press briefings live as they happen, but also if you miss something, if you're curious about something, go to one of the trusted sources that you watch and find videos that explain more. There's so many explainer videos out now about, comprehensive, here's what's been going on with the coronavirus. And it's just important to stay informed on things like this, because there's so much misinformation going around, and so much, oh, I heard this, my cousin said this, my brother said this. And this is a good way to hear numbers from doctors that have, in my opinion, shown nothing but grace and confidence when they're up there, and they don't seem like they're trying to fool anybody. And that's the type of information that we should be taking in, regardless, amidst all this chaos that's going on, and how you can't leave your house, and how the world is scary right now, and it is, and it's because people aren't always as informed as they should be, and the more that they're informed, the more they can take kind of a deep breath and realize that everything is going to be okay in the end. Everything is going to be fine.
Yes, I think you said it perfectly. Get the information straight from the horse's mouth. The reason that it's so important to tune into these every day is that the situation is so rapidly evolving. There are so many known unknowns, and then there's unknown unknowns on top of that, to borrow a Iraq War Bush administration phrase. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lindsay Wigo of the Daily Caller. Lindsay, tell everyone where they can find you on social media, so that they can stay up to date with everything coronavirus task force press conference related, if they are unable to tune in for a day.
Yeah. I'm most active on Twitter. My Twitter handle is just at Lindsay Wigo. I tweet out a lot of videos that I've been covering in the past couple of weeks related to the coronavirus. But a lot of videos in general that the Daily Caller is covering, whether on coronavirus or just more, large scale, can be found on our YouTube at Daily Caller. And a lot of our content related to press briefings is tweeted out from our brand account, from my account, and on our Facebook page as well. So definitely stay tuned for that. There's a lot more coming, I can tell you. Yeah.
All right, one more time, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We hope to have you back on the show sometime soon, hopefully when we're not all quarantined.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Of course.